everybody. Nice to meet you all. So this is work joint with Ben Edelman at the Harvard Business School, who also unfortunately couldn't attend because he's giving a lecture in half an hour. This is a study that we set out to do a little over a year ago, looking at typosquatting. And if I bore you at any point during the talk, for those of you, I guess it's just Salil and Harry who have laptops, you can look at this website here where we have put a lot of the data that we use in the paper. We present it to show a lot of good examples on that site. But typosquatting. Here's an example. So somebody tries to go to Cartoon Network, but they accidentally leave out the www.cartoonnetwork.com. This is not a new problem. This has been going on for more than a decade. So that is actually one of the reasons why it interests me in studying, is because this has been going on. People know about it. People complain about it. There are laws against it. And yet, here it is still happening. We saw this anecdotally, and so kind of what our initial goal was to set out and try to do a systematic census of all the typosquatting sites that we could find, classify them, find out what purposes they're being put to. For instance, this site is being put to the purpose of just hosting pay-per-click ads, but there could be other uses for these sites. So we basically went out, built crawlers to go visit all these sites. So here's what I'm going to talk about. Talking about how we decided to measure the problem, how the method we developed for discovering these sites, and our method of classification. Then I'll go into the different ways we found typosquatting sites to be used, principally how these sites are monetized, how value is extracted out of these different sites. And then I'll go into some of the options for trying to counter typosquatting to reduce its incidence, look at some of the existing efforts that have been going on for most of the last decade, and try to see why those haven't worked as effectively as they could have, and talk about maybe what we could do if we wanted to actually significantly reduce typosquatting. And for those of you who are willing to stay to the end, we have even come up with finally an estimate of how much of this we think is going on, and sort of or put a dollar figure on what we think the advertising revenue is. So stay tuned. Why should I care? Why should we care about typosquatting? What's the problem? Well, from a consumer perspective, typosquatting does confuse consumers. They try to go to Cartoon Network, and then what happens? They end up to this site that isn't the Cartoon Network but has something else presented to it. In the U.S., typosquatting is actually illegal in the event that the typo is close and matching to a trademark. So there's this Anti-Cybersquatting Consumer Protection Act, which forbids anyone to register, traffic in, or use domains which are confusingly similar to trademarks. And while not all domain names are trademarks, the vast majority are. And so it's it's not a good experience for the consumer. It's illegal in the U.S. It undermines the efficiency of the online advertising market. So companies are having to pay for traffic to reach their own sites and sites of competitors, even when it's already intended for the destination. And I'll show examples of this, where someone tries to visit a website, it's misspelled, and they end up seeing ads for that website. So a user has to actually click through the ad and then paying a commission to the domain owner and to the advertising platform in order to reach the site. And one of the things the final thing which kind of interested me in this effort is that I saw some analogies in sort of the tactics that are being used by the people carrying out typosquatting to what we see looking at other types of online crime, such as phishing, where you have an approach that's highly automatable, and an attack that can be replicated and carried out at high volume over lots and lots of targets. Phishing, you have many, many banks which are targeted, so the people who are carrying it out can distribute and just cause a little bit of pain to lots of different actors and keep it below a threshold. Similarly, the people who are registering these sites can spread out their targets, and they can have a few typos for lots and lots of different sites. So and keeping it, making it not worth the while for the people who own legitimate sites to actually do something about it. And please interrupt me with questions. Just thought I'd say that. So, some background on the structure of website domains and website registration. So we have, sort of at the top of this pyramid, we have ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigning Names and Numbers, which is essentially responsible for the assignment of domain names worldwide. And they license registries, which are, for example, the .com registry is maintained in the U.S. by VeriSign, and these registries then, which are typically smaller in number, will then interface to registrars, which are companies such as GoDaddy, Network Solutions, companies which actually interface to a customer who wants to buy a domain, and then they pay that registrar, and then the registrar sends the request back to the registry who maintains the authoritative list. Yep. Yeah. So ICANN is in fact responsible for everything, foreign and domestic. And this is actually a source of contention among non-Americans because although ICANN is a global operation, its authority stems from the Department of Commerce, so it's still actually tied to the U.S. So this is an area where you'll see a lot of political disputes going on about who runs the internet, who owns the internet. A lot of people think that ICANN is a tool of the American government, which is, I think, quite misplaced. But there you have it. So registrars will often then develop relationships with domain parkers or domainers, so companies which sort of specialize in registering lots and lots of domains that aren't being used for other purposes. Often it's turned out that some of the domainers have gotten so big that they find it better to just buy a registrar and sort of consolidate the whole thing. So you have these integrated registrar domainers. So the domainer then can negotiate directly with an ad platform. So Google AdWords, Yahoo, its Overture business, and if they're big enough, the domain parker has enough volume that he can negotiate directly with Google or Yahoo. But if it's a smaller domain parker, you've only got a few domains registered, you end up going through a traffic aggregator such as information.com, who then negotiates better rates with the ad platform. And then finally you reach the advertisers, the people who are paying to get their ads placed on the internet. So how do we find typosquatting domains? Well, what we decided to do, it's not rocket science. We gathered a list of popular web domains. We looked at the Alexa list. Alexa maintains a list of the top million sites. We just looked at the top 6,000, pulled out all of the .coms, and looked at .coms which had basically string length of 5 or more. So the reason we looked at .com is because we were able to get access to the zone file from VeriSign, who maintains the .com registry. So it's a global listing of all the .coms in the world that are currently registered. So because we can get that from .com, we did it. A lot of the country-specific domains don't have a requirement to disclose this publicly, so we had no way of being able to look at misspellings in .tv, for instance. So it seemed like a good approach since .com is the most popular, and we we only looked at domains which are more than 5 characters long because as you get into very short length names like eBay and this sort of thing, even one letter differences can be very likely to be popular at other real sites. So then we basically computed an edit distance between a given popular domain and all of the registered .coms, the 80 million plus .com domains that are active. And so the Dammerow-Levenstein distance is the minimum number of insertions, deletions, substitutions, or transpositions that you need to turn one string into another. So looking at examples, you have Facebook, and so on. So Facebook with an L, K, that's one insertion. You drop the O, that's a deletion. Substitution, you replace the O with an I, and transposition, just swapping letters. So any one of those actions counts as an edit distance of 1. So this edit distance has been used for spell checkers, for instance. Whenever you get suggestions for correct spellings, it's based on computing this distance and finding all the words which are within a similar edit distance. So we took it one step further and computed this thing called the fat finger distance. So rather than just looking at any random character transposition, we were especially interested in letters that were surrounding the intended letter on the QWERTY keyboard. Okay, so it's essentially the Levenstein distance, but looking for particular characters that are similar. So while that is true, according to this definition, we're looking just at adjacent transpositions. So it's not, yeah. So case boof would actually count as 2 in our measurement because it would count as 2 substitutions rather than a single transposition. But that's just the definition that Dammerow and Levenstein came up with back in the day. Right, so what we did is we just enumerated all the strings that have a Dammerow-Levenstein distance of up to 2 for each of the 3,000 and change popular domains we were looking for, and then we just intersected that set with the 81million.com domains, and we found about just under 2 million domains which we called candidate typo domains that were close in distance, matching these sites. So what we did is we wanted to test how good of a measure this was, and so I did a manual sample where I looked at about a little over 2,000 of these domains and went through and just inspected. Okay, is this actually a typo or is it a legitimate site? And this is what I came up with. So the y-axis shows basically the proportion of the sample which actually is in fact a typo domain. And then the x-axis shows the length and the string length of the popular domain. So the main takeaway here is that if the legitimate popular domain is long, then it's much more likely to definitely be a typo. Where it gets a little dicier is when we start looking at string domains which are 5, 6, 7 characters long. The left orange and red bars are for fat finger and Levenstein distance of 1. So even for these shorter domains, it's still a very high likelihood that it is, in fact, a typo, each one-letter different string. But once you get up to differences of 2, the likelihood of it being a typo falls way down until you keep going up and up. And once you get to about 12 or 13 characters, even distances of 2 are with very high likelihood, in fact, just typo domains. Typo. So what they are is sites which are not used for a legitimate purpose other than just to be parked and just or to put to one of the other purposes. Not like a news site or so like if you have New York Times and nytimes.com, you look at something that's abtimes.com. If it's, it could be that AB is for, representing some other city, and so that could actually be a legitimate news site, and that's a false positive. Yep.
Many of these typosquatting domains are owned by the direct domain owner and forwarders.
So
we're counting that as a typosquatting.
Okay, yeah. So we did encounter that, and so we basically looked for that and found. I'll get to the numbers, but there is an example of this kind of defensive registration. So your Facebook, so you register some close misspellings of Facebook and have it redirect. That happens, although surprisingly not very often. Like I believe low, like less than 1% of the time, I think. But I'll get to the exact figure soon. So this is what I showed you before. Cartoon Network. Somebody forgot the dot, and they also dropped the R. So it's www.cartoonnetwork.com. We have all these nice ads for Cartoon Network games leading to, different sites other than Cartoon Network. We've got more of these. So here's another one, a different kind of style of parking site, but more pay-per-click ads. And so we sort of, went through that. We ended up estimating that there's about 1,278 misspellings of CartoonNetwork.com, and here's about, I think, 150 of them. CartoonNetwork.com, the list goes on and on, right? So there's quite a few, it wasn't just for CartoonNetwork.com; it's for lots of these sites. And these are some of the selections of the most popular sites where we saw lots of typo domains. Google.com, there were around 5,000 candidate domains, so all domains which are within distance 1 or 2. And then we come up with a point estimate of 2,500 actual domains likely to be typosquatting. So this point estimate is derived based on the graph I showed you before, where we had based on Google being 6 characters long, we know that it's 6 characters long. So if it's a Levenstein distance of 1, then it's got a 90-something% chance of being typo. But if it's a distance of 2, then it's this other likelihood. So we went through that. We went through, did all of that for the 3,200 domains we studied. We found that out of the almost 2 million candidate typo domains, we estimate that 937,000 of these domains are in fact typos, not used for any other legitimate purpose. So that's a big number, I would say. Yes, Harry.
I'm sorry, I had a whole question about this whole thing. I know you know that you don't have to get many hits in order to make money. So,
yeah.
So it might pay you to register 5,000 domains or something.
Yes.
Like that. My question is, who types the
name?
Who types the domain name? I don't know anybody who types domain names.
Yeah.
People actually still do that.
Apparently people do. It's not everybody. You type Google.com. You type names which are popular, but even so, you get further down the list. There are sites which aren't household names like Google, and people are still registering typos for these sites. We went all the way down doing samples of sites that were not popular at all, like rankings of around 100,000, and they were still getting typos that are registered, loaded with parking pages. And since we're all friends here, Harry's got to go. I'll go ahead and skip to my punchline very quickly, where we were trying to estimate the traffic that we found. And what essentially, as an outside observer, it's hard to know exactly how much traffic typo sites are going to get, how many people are actually typing in these domains. The ad platforms aren't talking. The people who register these sites aren't going to tell us what their traffic stats are. So we decided to attempt a back-of-the-envelope calculation anyway. And so we were able to measure the daily visitors to typo sites looking at Alexa, which is what we used for finding out what the popular sites were. And then we inferred the revenue per search from Google's filings on its revenues. And so essentially we find, so Facebook.com, it's got a reach where so around 30% of the global internet visits Facebook on a daily basis, according to Alexa. which translates to roughly 300 million daily visitors. And it turns out that because Facebook is so popular, Alexa also picks up the popularity of misspellings of Facebook. So this is www.facebook.com. And what you see is that there are around 11,700 daily visitors just to www.facebook.com. Okay, according to Alexa. Now, this is really messy and their methodology is opaque, but it's a start. And so we did this. We looked at the typos for all of the top 50 or so .coms that we were studying in the sample, and looked at the typos, asked them for their Alexa rank, and we found that on average, visitors to the site's typo domains get 0.7% of the traffic the genuine site gets. So there are people who type it in, and a little less than 1% of those people on a daily basis seem to mistype and end up at one of these parking sites instead. And so if you apply that rate, if you apply that rate to the top 100,000 sites in Alexa, then if the top 100,000 sites, 0.7% of their traffic go to one of these typo sites, you get 68 million daily visitors, which is a lot. This is if this were treated as one website, it would be in the top 10 and ranked by Alexa. It's more popular than Twitter, MySpace, Amazon. People are definitely doing it.
This number is why ISPs keep trying to find ways to hijack.
This is why we found. This is why there are a million .com domains that we found which are closed typos that have been registered. I mean, there is money to be had here. I'll come back and talk more about how we estimated the revenues. Is very messy. I mean,
yeah, like Harry said, maybe people don't type domain names that often. You imagine that they do for sites they go to very often.
So that's
like Google and Facebook and so on. But kind of extrapolating from the top 50 .coms to the top 100,000.
Yeah.
So this 0.7%, how does the graph of that look as you're going from 1 down to 50?
Yeah, so let me just try this here. So this is the online appendix, and I have a table of the top 50. So it varies. So we have. So for Google, this is our daily visitor estimate: 425 million, 2.5 million daily visitors to its typo sites. But as you can see, it really varies. So like Yahoo's much smaller, only 0.10%. But so there's a lot of variance here. But as you go down, it can be as high as more than 1%. So it's there's a lot of volatility here. I mean, I'm not prepared to come up with 95% confidence interval on our estimate here. This is more an attempt to say, okay, how much of this is can we quickly infer how big of a problem this is. Okay, all right. So, and I'll go ahead and steal my thunder a little bit, but when we apply this down to what we think the revenue might be for Google, which I'll go back and show you, around 57% of the typo sites we looked at had pay-per-click ads run by Google. And so if you look at how much money Google makes per impression, this is wildly speculated on, but Google doesn't disclose this. but other people have sort of poured over their SEC filings and come up with an estimate of around 3.5 cents of revenue per Google search. Google, meanwhile, has their own reports for their AdSense for Domains program, which suggests that the revenues that come for this are at least as good as search, often better. So if we use this 3.5 cents revenue per search for the 57% of the typo domains that have Google pay-per-click ads, then we end up with another extrapolated value of around $500 million a year in advertising revenue to Google alone for these typo sites. So it's quite a bit of money. Any questions, or can I'll go back to explaining how I figured this out? Okay.
This
yes.
table,
Yes. Which table? This one.
previous one, this classification of how many are real typo domains or not, how was it done?
That was done by me taking a random sample of the 2 million, a random sample of 2,000 of them, and I ensured that I had, I think, 30 or 40 in each category. Put it into a giant spreadsheet. When I was taking the bus to New York one day, I sat and was going through and looked at each of these sites to figure it out. So it was 4 hours of manual labor.
Seems like the Typosquatting when you drop the dot after www is a popular one.
Yes, yeah,
Do
it
you
is.
have any notion of which ones work better and which ones?
Well, I think ones which are closer tend to work better. We could look more closely at that Alexa data to figure out, which ones tend to receive higher number of site visitors. But I kind of don't want to put too much effort into this, into pouring over that data, because it's very messy and imprecise. But I'm really only confident in aggregating up over large numbers of the sample from Alexa to say anything. Here we are. So how did we determine that 57% of Typosquatting is on Google pay-per-click ads versus something else? To do this, we had to build a crawler, which actually went out and visited lots of candidate typo sites. But at least for me, about 1 million sites was too many to crawl, especially given that so many of these sites will have some false positives, especially for the shorter length domain names. So we instead looked at about 284,000 domains where we had a much higher confidence that they definitely were typo sites. So we looked at only the sites which were within Levenstein distance of 1 for domains which are 5 to 9 characters long. But then if it's 10 characters or more, we decided, okay, we'll look at ones which are have an edit distance of 2. So we got that sample, and we went to each domain. My crawler would pull down the index page and headers, look through it, visit 3 randomly selected links, and keep doing this for up to a depth of 3. These numbers were kind of selected based on heuristics from during the process. But crucially, what we did is we stopped anytime we encountered a link or a redirect to a known advertising domain. So, the way pay-per-click ads work is, you click on a link and it redirects you via a Google domain called googlesyndication.com or googleadservices.com. So our crawler would look for a list of these domains. As soon as it encountered one, it would say, "Oh, this is an ad. Stop. Don't follow through." Because the last thing we wanted to do for this crawler is to actually go through and pay all sorts of money to the people who run these sites. So we didn't want to follow through on the links, and so we didn't.
Using that approach, it seems it's going to have a lot of false positives in the sense that there are a lot of legitimate domains out there that support themselves via display ads in one way or another. So would that crawler flag every one of those sites as?
Well, now remember, I'm not looking at every site in the world. I'm only looking at the ones which I'm suspecting to be typo-squatting sites, and based on the sampling, if my sample was representative, then these sites have greater than 95% likelihood of being a typo site.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're using the statistics to figure out the differences among the typo sets you don't care if you're getting the 5%.
Yes. Yeah. As it turns out, it's trying to crawl these sites, you encountered a number of problems. We were able to successfully classify 93,000 of the domains, and 74,000 of those had pay-per-click ads. Another 20,000 used redirection or other links to popular domains or often would redirect to a competitor. I'll show you some examples of that. We were blocked by over 124,000 domains, encountered CAPTCHAs, just refusing our connection. The main reason for this is that most of these sites are often run on the same server, so you can have tens of thousands of different typo domains all being hosted on the same server, run from the same IP address. And so when we're visiting thousands and thousands of these, the first few hundred will come through, and we can classify them fine. And then eventually, the system will basically ban our IP because we're trying to visit their site too frequently. So we looked through the data, poured through, and found out that this was the main reason for most of the blocking. But it is what it is. And there were further 70,000 domains we just couldn't classify correctly or not, mainly due to incomplete JavaScript parsing. Okay, so that's how we crawled. How do we use the domains? How could the domains be used? There were two main strategies. The one is pay-per-click ads, which I've talked about, and I'll talk about it a bit more now. So for the sites that had pay-per-click ads, there were different services that could be used. Google was the most frequently occurring one that we found. Yahoo was also found, but less frequently. Then there was one-off, very small numbers of people using Ask, Miva, Enhance, these other pay-per-click ad providers that you may have heard of Ask, but I don't think anybody in this room has heard of Miva. Yes?
So I thought that Google had policies against allowing their ads to be displayed on pages with no content. Is that not the case?
So it's not the case anymore. So I think what you have to do, they have a special program. So if you don't have any content, you just have a parked site, you are supposed to sign up for Google's AdSense for Domains program, which they started about a year and a half ago. So Google has decided, if you have a website that doesn't have any content, you're just parking it, we'll let you put ads on it, but you have to be classified into this separate group. Well, part of what we found is that, I think it is sketchy because so many of the parked domains are in fact typo domains. But
So as a customer of Google, can I say I don't want my ads to be displayed on this?
so this has been kind of a toing and froing between Google and advertisers. Some advertisers want to be very prescriptive in the sites they can appear on. Google used to say, no, you can't do it at all. Now they've gotten it to where I believe you can decide which categories you want to have your ads appear on. So you can decline as an advertiser to have your ads not appear on any AdSense for Domains programs. Turns out that there are still some of these domains, a good chunk of these domains, which are not part of the AdSense for Domains program. So even if you don't check that box, you're still going to have some of your ads appearing there. One final thing. So a notable omission here. Which ad platform do you not see? Microsoft. So Microsoft does not have a program to put ads on parked domains. So it is possible for an ad platform to take the decision that this is something they shouldn't be doing. Okay, so let me give you some more examples. So this is a typo of Walmart.com. wall-marat.com. And what's notable here is look at the second sponsored link. It is for Walmart.com. Okay, so someone tries to go to Walmart.com. First thing they see is an ad for Walmart, as well as some of its competitors. Another example, www.expedia.com. First sponsored listing, Expedia, followed right by Expedia's direct competitors, Orbitz, Cheap Tickets, and so on. So this happened quite a lot, and so we looked for it in the Google ads, and we found that for 263 of the popular domains, we found that they were buying ads through Google, and that their ads often appeared on typos typos close to the actual domain, and this varied. So first of all, you're only seeing this on 263 of the domains. The one reason why is the advertiser has to actually buy domains. Walmart and Expedia have to make a decision that they're going to buy the pay-per-click ads in order for it to appear on their typos. And some sites had much higher rates of this sort of self-advertising phenomenon than others. PapaJohns.com, for instance, had 90% of the typos of PapaJohns.com included a Google ad to the real PapaJohns.com.
Do they have to bid separately on each typo, or is there something more expressive you can say on bidding all the...
So you bid on keywords, and so Papa John's bids on keywords like pizza, pizza delivery, this sort of thing. The people who have registered Papa John's with 2s's.com will list keywords as pizza, pizza delivery, the same as on the real Papa John's, and they rely on Google or the other ad platforms to syndicate ads which are relevant. And using the same keywords, it so happens that the real site is often relevant.
But in principle, you could bid on Papa John's with 2S.
Oh, right.
Probably win with a very low bid.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah. So I do think that Google sometimes, I think that some of the ad platforms have prohibitions on bidding on misspellings of particular names. But yeah, that's a good point. But overall, yeah, we found that whenever there was this self-advertising, about 36% of the time, the pay-per-click ads will have links to themselves. And I think this is one of probably the most striking reasons why I think typosquatting is bad for advertisers, because they're essentially having to pay for ads to appear on sites that are typos of their sites, just to have a foot in the door and trying to get the user to continue on to the real site. If they choose not to pay, you could just say, look, I don't want to participate in the AdSense for Domains program. Well, if Expedia said that, then but Orbitz and Cheap Tickets continued to participate. The only way to get, whenever you type this in, you aren't presented with an option to go to Expedia any longer. So the advertiser's hands are somewhat forced here. So the other thing we did is we went through and we found the advertising link, and we looked, and often you can infer the particular advertising partner ID in the ad link itself. So this is an example link. So we have this domains.googlesyndication.com. This first parameter here is client is CADP Imboran. So this is the partner who runs the typo site. This is how they will get credit from Google for the ads that get bought. And so what we did is we looked through all these links, and we found there's very high concentration in these links. So a small number of advertising partner IDs account for the vast majority of the sites with Google ads. So this is a CDF here where this is the percentage of typo domains that are covered, and this is the number of Google client IDs that we saw. So if you see, we have the 5 most frequently occurring Google client IDs account for somewhere around 60% of all of the Google pay-per-click ads we observed. Okay, so there's a small number of large players doing the bulk of the work here, and this is sort of what the client IDs looked like. So we had ones that would start off CADP Highlands and then star some other particular unique number. We saw 14,000 domains there. GoDaddy is a domain company. We know them. Cedo is a exclusively domain parking company. These are each basically different names for the large domain parking companies, and we see them, doing the bulk, appearing on the bulk of the sites. So the other kind of interesting phenomenon we observed, besides pay-per-click ads, is often you would type in a site with misspelling, and then it would redirect to a different site. Often we came into this situation where the redirection goes from one site to a competitor of that site. So a user's trying to go to sharebee.com, which is a document sharing website, but he accidentally types in shafebee.com. And what happens? He gets redirected to pict.com, excuse me, another document sharing site, albeit one that's far less popular. And this happened quite systematically. We found 128 typo domains that redirected to pict.com. Notice that these aren't just random typos. These are typos for the same category of website. So, pic.com, it's a file sharing. You upload your pictures and exchange it with friends. So typos of deposit files, Picoodle, Sharebee, ImageBam, ImageVenue, these are all direct competitors to Pict, where you had the typos for those sites then automatically redirected down to Pict. I first saw this. So Pict, I found using this heuristic, which I'll talk to you about in a second. I first saw this, I think, in a one-off example, and then I just came up with this heuristic, which let me give you one more example, then I'll get to how we discovered these automatically out of the data. So someone mistypes Yellow Pages, Yelko Pages they type, they get redirected to Yellow Pages of the World, some obscure Yellow Pages site. And there are 156 misspellings of Yellow Pages that redirect to Yellow Pages of the World, completely unrelated site. So how do we find this? Well, we decided we wanted to identify the beneficiary domains. So the beneficiary domains are yellowpagesoftheworld.com, pict.com. Find the ones which are linked to by lots of different typo domains. But because we noticed that websites like Pict are picky when they decide which typos they're going to have redirected from. So we came up with a heuristic saying that, okay, so let's look for all of the domains that get redirected. And of these domains, they have to be redirected or linked to from at least 75 different typo domains. But the typo domains must match 40 or fewer different popular domains. So the idea is you see lots of popular or lots of typo domains, but it's just a few particular types of domains that are actually misspelled, because this is very different from the behavior that we observed with the domain parking companies, which just register en masse lots and lots of typos of all sorts of popular domains. And so just by having those two conditions, what fell out were examples like pict.com and lots of other very context-specific examples. So like bet365.com is linked to by lots of different casino and gambling sites. Sportsbook.com typos, BetClick, Full Tilt Poker. SmashingGames.com gets redirected from 376 different typos for all these different misspellings of game sites, and so on and so forth. And we found a total of 75 different beneficiary domains like this. And what was striking was that even with that simple heuristic, this fell out, and what we continued to see was context-specific typos. So, yeah.
Are these companies like Bet365 legitimate companies?
So this could happen for a couple of reasons. So Bet365 is one of the more legit ones on here. they could be receiving these links and redirects from sites because they have an affiliate program where someone refers you. Someone comes to your site, just like with Amazon. You're reading a review of a book on a blog, and someone provides a link. That is the person who refers you get a cut of the commission. So it could be that, like in Bet365's case, that they have a similar affiliate program. But in other cases, like with Picked.com, it's definitely not the case. It just is a straight redirect. I haven't looked closely enough at Bet365 to know what they did in their case. So there are other.
But so these companies are putting themselves, if they are doing this themselves.
If they're doing this themselves, then this is fairly shady dealings, right? It's hard for me to know exactly what they're, whether it's the company themselves who's acting or whether it's someone who's an affiliate that's acting, on its behalf. We can only speculate. So the other times you might see redirections from one type of domain to another is first what Steve mentioned, which is companies will defensively register misspellings. And we found around 4,000 typo domains which definitely redirected to the corresponding popular domain, and they shared the same name server with the popular domain. So we were pretty confident that this is a legitimate redirect. Then this number may be a bit higher, but there were other sites where we saw the redirections to the legitimate site in 10,000 cases. And this could be for two different reasons. This could be because the company has defensively registered, but the name server might be different because it's being run by a security brand protection company, and they use their name server to redirect. But the other common thing that we observed is that this would be an attempt to do affiliate marketing abuse. So there are companies who called Commission Junction, Link Share, Link Synergy. These companies sort of run affiliate marketing programs so that they kind of serve the purpose of Amazon, so that someone refers you to a site. So, for instance, 1-800-CONTACTS is a client of Commission Junction. So someone talks about contacts, and then they provide a link from their site. People click through, and 1-800-CONTACTS will pay a cut of the actual purchased contact lenses. But this is often abused, where there are like a number of misspellings of 1-800-CONTACTS, for instance, which are redirected immediately to 1-800-CONTACTS. The user doesn't know any different, but if they actually go through and buy the contacts, then the person who registered the misspelling gets a cut. Okay, so this is kind of neat. We have all this data on lots of different Typosquatting sites for different corresponding popular domains, and we were asking ourselves, okay, why is it that some sites are Typosquatted more than others? So we had an initial hypothesis that maybe sites that are hard to spell are more likely to get typos registered. So we ran a regression. We controlled for domains that had IEs and EIs, because that might be hard to spell, or double letters. We didn't find any effect. But we did, however, find a significant effect across different categories of websites. So some classes of websites seem to be getting Typosquatted significantly more than others. And our question was, okay, maybe this is because the ads that you can fetch for different categories of website vary in price. So to test that, we created something called a Google price per click price index. So we extracted the keywords from all the popular domains where we had the different categories for them. So we went to papajohns.com. It said its keywords were pizza and so on. And then we went, and Google has something for people in the AdSense program where they can they can sort of use this traffic estimator to get estimated prices for what you can fetch for different keywords. So we put all these keywords into this traffic estimator, which gave us, okay, pizza, you can expect to get this many cents per click, and computers, you can expect to get this many per click, and so we computed this price index sort of based on the average of the different prices that we could fetch, according to Google. And what we found is this. So again, these are for all the different websites according to Alexa for the different categories that they had. And so on the y-axis shows this price per click index, and on the x-axis shows the number of typo domains that we observed. It's actually controlling for the popularity of the site itself. So what you see is that the category of sites which receive the highest number of typos also happens to have by far and away the highest return on clicks. And it's kind of messy, but it does follow a fairly definite pattern, so that the more popular the site, in terms of not the more popular site, excuse me, the more number of typos of a site we observe for a category, the higher the price that is fetched from according to what Google will pay out. So I think this.
What do the labels indicate here? Are these those are the keywords?
So these are for each of the 3,000 popular domains we looked at. Alexa has a category saying that what type of site this is. Okay, so Forbes.com has been labeled as a business site, and so on and so forth. So, yeah.
Science and computers are lucrative, maybe because science people don't make mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of narratives you can pull out from this sort of thing. I mean, we actually initially had speculated that perhaps kids' sites would receive more typos because kids would be worse at spelling. But it turns out that kids don't receive that many typos relative to the popularity of the site, but they also don't fetch a very high pay-per-click price, which suggests that it's price which is driving it. Yes, although do note that this is a logarithmic y-axis, I should say. Yeah.
If you throw out adult and business, is there much of a trend at all when you did it?
Haven't tried it.
Those would seem to be the major drivers of slow move.
Yeah. I mean,
It's fairly flat after you put up. There's probably a slight thing to help my creation. They're going to drag it up a little. I'm just wondering how strong it is.
it's weak. It's weak. Yeah. The effect is weak, but the data is very messy. Yes. Yep.
The other stat that is, so your estimate was something about on the order of 3 cents per impression.
Yeah.
Right. So here we're getting on the order of $1 or $2
Per click.
click.
Yes.
So that you say that even these domain partners, not only are they getting only a tiny fraction of the traffic, but only a tiny fraction of people show up there actually click on anything.
So I'm trying to remember exactly what the click-through rate is fairly small. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly, because how this relates to that 3.5 cents thing, that was somebody else's, their inferred estimate. So I'll have to think about that. Okay, so quickly, I'll talk about what could and should be done about dealing with typosquatting. So there are existing efforts to try to stem typosquatting. There's something that was set up a little over 10 years ago called UDRP, the Uniform Domain Name Dispute Resolution Policy, created by ICANN. So this is sort of a semi-automated process where if you think that someone has registered a typo of your trademark, you can pay a few $1,000, and it's viewed as more streamlined compared to going through just a standard court process. It's been invoked 45,000 times over the past 10 years. So then we have something called ACPA, the statute I talked about earlier that makes typosquatting illegal in the U.S. Does allow trademark holders to sue in rem, which means they can sue the domain itself even if the registrant can't be found. So registrars are kind of on the hook. ACPA allows for statutory damages, a minimum of $1,000 per infringing domain. So the intent was to try to put a price on infringement because putting that price can be quite difficult. So unfortunately, this has been going on, but hasn't, as we've shown, it hasn't really stopped typosquatting to any significant amount. There have been a few lawsuits sued under ACPA. Some very motivated trademark holders have gone after some typosquatters. Verizon, Microsoft, and Neiman Marcus, some prominent examples. But in our data, we see that they still have, even after they've gone for the lawsuit, there are still the sites that get re-registered and used. So the legal process has been partially successful at best. 45,000 UDRP requests seems like a lot until you consider that we estimated that there's 1 million that we found in our study. So in the 10-year history of UDRP, they've removed around 5% of what we're observing to be active today. So even though it's an automated procedure, it's still not operating at the scale to have a measurable effect. So my takeaway from this is that individual trademark holders going after individual squatters is not a sustainable way to actually significantly reducing typosquatting. So I think instead we need to be looking up a little bit higher in the food chain, the domain aggregators, domain parkers, and the ad platforms. Yeah.
The $33 million judgment for Verizon, is that against a specific domain?
So that's against a specific domain registrar who had a bunch of typos registered there, and this registrar basically refused to give up the information of the people who registered the domain, and so there was I think a few hundred typos that were subject to that judgment, and the judge decided $33 million. In fact, Verizon didn't receive any of that money. They got the judgment, but I think the registrar just shut its doors. So when we look at the domain registrars, the domain parkers, there are some domain parkers which seem to have a lot more typosquatting than others. So as a proxy for looking at the domain parkers, we looked at all the different name servers that resolve to lots and lots of domains. So a single name server, which is responsible for resolving over 100,000 domains. There aren't that many of those out there, but those who are primarily domain parking companies. And what we found is that some of them have fairly high incidence of typosquatting. DNS name server, almost 5% of the domains it resolves to are typosquatting. By contrast, you have some of the large domain parkers who actually do a pretty darn good job. That they have 0.1% of the domains which they are resolving. We believe are typosquatting. So the argument that we're a domain parker, we can't be assured that there's not typosquatting on here kind of rings a little hollow when you see that some large domain parkers are doing a good job of not taking on typosquatting. So I think we do need to talk a bit about what should ad platforms do, Google AdSense and Yahoo's Overture program and the like, because 80% of the crawled typo domains we found had pay-per-click ads on them. So this is now the main way in which typos are monetized. The interesting thing to note is that ad platforms are in a good position to do something about typo squatting. They're the ones who know, have the information about who the ad partners are and the domains that match those ad partners. And so they could take some initial steps to select their partners more carefully, ban partners who engage in significant typo squatting, this sort of thing. The other thing to note is that ad platforms are least cost avoiders, and that they can do something about typo squatting with a lot less effort than any other party. They already have good typo detection, right? You go to a search engine, you type in a search that's misspelled. It has a very good recommendation for what the correct spelling is. They also know a lot about where people are trying to go, by virtue of the data that they collect. So I think a feasible approach would be to stop syndicating your ads on misspellings of top trademarks. This could be an initial first step, and undercutting significantly the ad revenue that the typo squatters receive. So this is what I talked about before, our estimate for the for what we think the aggregate cost is. But I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I just want to say, typo squatting is a continuing problem. You have 1 million domains impersonating just a few thousand of the top sites. The payout that advertisers get, so the payout from advertisers to ad networks and the domain parkers outweighs any individual effort that these holders of the correct site have to actually do something about it. But I think because we see such high concentration in the number of ad partners and also in the number of domain parkers, this suggests that we could actually have some pretty significant effect by going after the worst offenders. And if you're interested in more, we have a pretty detailed online appendix going through lots of examples of these sites. Thanks, guys.
So what is to, other than goodwill, to get the ad platforms to do more?
What is the what?
You were talking about remedies. You're saying that the ad platforms are the.
So other than asking nicely, what else can be done? Well, Ben can speak to this more, in that if you don't want to play nice, you can sue the ad platforms, which is exactly what Ben has done. He's co-counsel in a class action lawsuit against Google and the top domain parkers for engaging in systemic typo squatting. Again, I can't say more about that because I don't know. But yeah, so this is open to interpretation, right? Ben says yes, Google says no. I mean, I am not a lawyer, but there is language in the ACPA which says, it's almost a direct quote that it's not quite, but it's almost a direct quote that it's forbidden to register, traffic in, or use domains which are confusingly similar to trademarks. Ben makes the argument that that typo domains are being used by Google because Google is syndicating the ads and profiting from them. Google disagrees. I'm sure there are more subtleties to that argument than what we could talk about. But I think I don't know. I don't know. But yeah.
$500 million per year.
Yeah. This is a new calculation. Yeah. I mean, one of the things I think he's trying to get in discovery is how much money is being made from these sites. So, an actual amount, not just what we can stab at in the air. But I mean, I think this line of research is important because and I think it can be a contribution to actually bringing this to a reduction, because we all sort of know that typo squatting goes on. Anytime you actually type something in the browser and misspell it, you're likely going to end up on one of these sites. But once you actually go through the process and figure out how widespread the problem is, and start putting numbers on how many people are affected by it, I think that it can go a long way towards motivating the need to do something. We will see. Yep.
Did you talk to the companies that actually sell the Typosquatting?
So
Because so if my ad appears on a typo for a competitor,
Yeah.
might it be good?
yeah, so that's true. So Ben does some consulting for a number of large trademark holders, and so the ones that he's talked to, albeit a biased sample because they've come to him, don't like typosquatting at all, and they do, even the ones who bid on keywords for park domains, they do it because they feel like they have no choice, and so and they don't even control where the sites appear. They're doing this in order to get it to appear on their own sites, on their own typo sites, and it sometimes will go onto their competitors, which I guess they might view, hey, at least we get some of that back. I mean, they are paying good money for it, so. Great, thanks guys.